and thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be going through this that I did last week. So this is a Ginko and I did it in very neutral colours, not too bright, and didn't use very many colours. Now I talked about this on a little live video that I did last week, so I've just started having a go at doing the live ones with my phone. Like I previously said, I don't have any Wi-Fi down here or internet, so I just use my phone with the data roaming down here to do some quick little live ones. So I'll be doing some more of those because you all seem to like that, and I was asked if I could do this one from the beginning to show you the process. So it's very difficult obviously to get an exact you know, piece the same again, especially when you're doing it in watercolour, because you're not going to get your colours exactly the same, and obviously watercolour does its own thing. But I'll try and get it as close as I can and use the same colours that I used in this one. Okay, so to begin with, I wanted it to be very simple. Like I said, I didn't want to use too many colours, and a very simple line and shape. So to begin with, I just drew this outline and then, you know, the leaves. I didn't do any drawing for these background leaves. Okay, so I'll set off with the drawing, and I've actually just pop that out of the way. I've got an SAA watercolour paper, so that's £140 not pressed, and I've taped it all the way around to the board. So my pencil is a H. So to begin with, I just put that line in really of the branch coming out, and then this lovely sweep, and didn't worry too much if it was exactly accurate looking at the photograph, just getting that nice arch going along. Okay, and then started to put the leaves in from this end, working along, and again I kept a very simple shape on the leaves. I didn't go into too much detail, just got the basic shapes of where they were at, so that we could see that they were Ginko as well, with that little sort of fan shape that they have. Okay, so I'll carry on now and do all these leaves, and then I'll come back to you when we're going to start and put some paint on. Okay, so the drawing has come out slightly different to the last one. Like I say, it's very difficult to get them exactly the same, and I wasn't going to spend hours trying to replicate it. But we've got that nice sweep of leaves going across. So I didn't want the paper to be absolutely white. Like I said, I was going for this sort of muted, soft look, and I wanted to take the white off the paper. So I've got a mix of yellow ochre. Now you can see that's very, very watery. There's a lot of water in there because all I want is, like I said, take that white off the paper. I don't want a bright colour in the background. Now I'm using this palette because my other palette, the ceramic one that I use every day, is actually full of paint for another painting that I'm working on at the moment. So I'm using these ones which I had given, but I really would not recommend using a coloured palette because the colour of your paint doesn't show true. So if you are using something that's coloured, to see what colour your paint is, get a scrap of paper and always test it on that. But really you should have a white palette. So I'm just using this because I don't want to waste that other paint and take it out of the palette. Okay, so I've got a nice 1-inch flat brush. So this is a Dale Rowney one. I'll pop that to one side. So like I say, plenty of water, a very watery mix onto a dry paper. And actually, before I start doing that, I'm just going to slightly tilt my board. Let me just excuse me one moment. So I've got two of these palettes. I'll just pop the other one under the edge of that board to give it a bit of a tilt before we start. I mean, the good thing about this is it's actually got a thumb hold there, so it has its uses. So starting at the left hand side and going all the way across, with a fully loaded brush, and the same again. You see that's drying out a little bit too much there. Get your brush fully loaded all the way across with a nice firm pressure all the way across. Again, it's drying out a bit, I don't know. Maybe this brush isn't holding as much as I thought. It's a new brush. Got a hair there, just get that off. When you are painting in watercolour and you get bits of hair or fluff or things on your paintings, don't fuss too much about getting them off, because when it's dry you'll be able to get them off much more easily. Sometimes if you try getting them off when the paint's wet, if you've already done lots of work on that painting, it can, you can lift the paint off when you're trying to get your little bits of hair and things off, so I wouldn't do that too much. Okay, so it's not actually too even there, is it? It's I'm just going to try and, because I've got it very, very watery, I'm just going to try and even it out a little bit. Don't do this if it's already starting to dry off. You'll end up with it very blotchy. Make sure you go all the way across. Okay, so I've got to leave that to completely dry before I do anything else. Okay, so while that was drying, it gave me time to make a brew and also to make some more paint up. Now you'll see I've got a line here. This wash is nowhere near as nice as the first wash that I did on the first painting. Two reasons for that really. One, I think I've used far too much water, and two, I used a brush that I've not used before. So it just goes to show you should really practice with your brushes. The other thing is, I'm used to working with a very heavy paper. I use a 300-pound paper when I'm doing my own work, and I tend to forget that this is a practice paper that won't take that amount of water. So it's cockled a little bit, and then we've got this line. So it doesn't actually matter in this instance because it's going to be underneath where the leaves are. So it's just, learn from my mistakes type of thing really. Remember what paper you're using. I'm just pushing it down again there because it had all sort of come up because I put too much water on. Okay, so now I've made another mix of just the same colour, so that's yellow ochre again with less water and more paint pigment, and we're going to just do the impression of some leaves in the background. So I'll do some lines of where maybe it's branches, and these, don't forget when you put your watercolour on that it's going to fade and be a lot lighter. Now, I'm not actually doing the branches in branch colours, I'm just sticking to the one colour in the background. Because when this is dried, you're not really going to be paying lots of attention to this. All the focus is going to be on these foreground leaves, and this is just going to add to the background. So just look at the basic shapes and use the shape of your brush by putting a bit of pressure on your brush and using the tip of it to make these triangular shapes of the fan shapes, perhaps you might call them, and vary the angles a bit and the pressure on your brush so that sometimes you're getting more paint on the paper than others. That's going to help get you some of that sort of light and shade that's going on. Very dappledy, sunlight coming through them. So in places there will be little gaps, imagining it's some sort of sunlight. They don't all have to be attached to that branch that you've put there. That was just as a guide where to put some little marks, because although these are supposed to be leaves, they're just marks on the paper that are just giving this little impression of leaves in the background. And again, as soon as we finish this, we need to just leave it to completely dry before we go on to the next stage. So the thing about this is having a bit of patience. So if you have some other jobs to be doing, that's great. Like I say, go and make yourself a brew, but don't rush it, and work on it whilst it's all still wet. There's one or two just peeping through under here. The photograph itself that I'm working for was again off Pixabay. I know I've mentioned it a lot, but I do use it a lot, simply because you're very safe knowing that you've got that thing where the license free, so you're not worrying about any copyright infringements. But also because of the quality, there's such fantastic quality photographs on there. And you do have the option, if you use a photograph in your own work and you want to exhibit it, you do have the option of sending the photographer some money if you like. It's actually a little button that says coffee, so it's basically a tip jar. If you use a photograph and you want to say thank you to the photographer, you can, just give them £1 or £2 to get themselves a cup of coffee, or more if you prefer. That's perhaps just a little bit too uniform coming down there. I'm just going to add some extra dots and dashes in. Can you see by how sometimes if you allow more paint to come off your brush and then allow your brush to dry out a bit, and you're going to get some darker areas and some lighter areas as they dry. Of course, you don't need to work from a photograph. You could actually do something like this completely from your imagination. And you could use a different tree, you could use a blossom tree, a cherry, but just obviously using slightly different colours, but using a similar idea of keeping it to a limited palette to have a very simple and peaceful looking painting. I think it makes a rather nice sort of calm picture. And they're quite well laden with leaves, aren't they, these trees? They're quite full. Just going back to the top now and just dropping in 1 or 2 extra bits of paint, just to, like I say, increase that sense of dappled light and shade. You can see I'm not really doing much drawing, I'm just popping the paint in places. Okay, and then we'll leave that to completely dry. Okay, so now those background leaves are dry, we can go on and do more detail in the foreground. So using again that same colour, I'm going to add more of the paint to that colour. And not a lot more water, so this is going to be a thicker mix than the background mix. I'm just going to go over every leaf to have this as a base colour on every leaf. So I will speed this up, but I'm just going to carefully go, like I say, over every leaf with this colour. I'm actually going to use a slightly smaller brush, I think, for this. So I'll just get one. Just so that I can get the shapes of those leaves a little bit better with a smaller brush. Okay, so I'll carry on and do every leaf all the way along this branch, and then I'll come back and show you the next bit. Okay, so that's all completely dry now, so we can go ahead and put another layer on. Now I think I've made a terrible mistake today. I think I've got out of the wrong side of bed and I've put this paper on my board upside down. And this is why, can you see we've got a lot of difference in the colour here. It's not an even colour, it's not drying very well, and I'm sure, and I will have a look when I take it off, but I'm sure that I've put this paper on upside down. So I think we'd better rename this video What Not to Do. But yeah, so I'm going to carry on with it, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's just another thing for you to remember not to do, is not to put your paper on upside down. So again, so far we've only used one colour, so now I'm going to introduce another colour. So we've got the Yellow Ochre still on the palette there, and to make it a little bit darker I'm going to use its opposite. So the opposite of yellow on the colour wheel is obviously violet, and I'm going to use a little touch of the Winsor Violet into there, one of my favourite colours. I love Winsor Violet. Make that a little bit darker, and again test it on a scrap piece of paper. So at this stage I'm not really looking too much at the original photograph. Now what I want to do is use this darker colour to make it look like we've got some shape in the leaves, but also to separate the leaves a little bit from each other. So rather than looking at the photograph and where the shadows are on there, I'm going to use the darker colour to, you know, differentiate between some of these leaves and add a touch of definition. And I'll carry on doing that again all the way along the branch, and I'll speed this up for you. So I hope I don't get loads of thumbs downs on this video for putting my paper on upside down. These things happen to the best of us. And I do always want to leave my mistakes in these videos, because that's how we learn, isn't it? From other people's mistakes as well as from our own. Okay, so as you can see that's still drying, but as I'm going on to the stem now, I'm not going to worry about the fact that that's still drying. And I'm going to use the same dark colour that we've just used for those to put the first layer on this stem here. So in places we can't actually see it, it's hidden behind the leaves. So it's just to give, you know, the basic impression of where that branch is going. It's got a little bit of a knot on it there. Here we can hardly see it at all, we can just see little bits of it poking along here. Actually missed a bit of a leaf out there, I'm just going to pop that in. And while that's still wet, I've made another little mix up, and this has got the same Winsor Violet, and it's got two browns, it's got burnt sienna and burnt umber. And I'm just going to put that on the underside of here while it's still wet, and on this little knot and things, just to give us a little bit of shape to that branch and a bit of contrast with that darker colour. And go where that little knot is, there's a bit of a knot there. So the rest of it we've done pretty much straight onto dry paper and dry paint, but just with that we'll just let that run together to give us the impression of more of a shape for that branch, and just get the end there as well. Okay, so that more or less completes that. You could go on and put extra detail in, you know, a bit more. You could even go a little bit darker on that branch if you wanted as well. So we'll just compare it now to the first one. Now this one, took me a lot less time. I obviously spent more time on the first one, because you know, when I'm doing these for you, I'm aware that I don't want to be spending all day doing it, because one, it will bore you, and two, I haven't really got the time for that. So this has been a really good exercise in learning what not to do. Don't put your paper upside down. What was the other thing that I did wrong? Oh, I used too much water on this paper. Actually, that might be another reason why it all cockled, because it was upside down. So if we look at the first one, you can see the colours are completely different, even though we've used exactly the same colours. So it just shows, and you'll have found this as well when you go to a class with other people painting, that you'll all be doing the same subject and you'll all be perhaps using similar colours and things, and you come out with 10 completely different artworks. So, you know, we can see that that's completely different. So I will list the colours below, because these are the same colours on here that I used on here. Obviously in this darker bit below here, I've used more, a stronger mix, probably less water, and probably more of the burnt umber as opposed to the burnt sienna. On here, I did, because I felt it lacked a bit of colour at the end, I did go over and put a bit of cadmium. Can you see, just on the back of one or two, very lightly on one or two leaves. I'm not going to do this on here because it's stronger colours to begin with. So I prefer the first one, I have to be honest. Like I say, we've made a mistake putting it upside down, but it gives you, you know, the idea of what to do. So make your drawing first in pencil, very lightly, so that your pencil lines don't show later. Put a very fine wash of yellow ochre on, just to take away that whiteness of the paper. Allow it to dry, do these background shapes, allow those to dry, and then come on and do the foreground. So we just had the three colours mostly in the leaves there. Okay, so what I'll do, although this isn't dry, I mean, it's obviously going to just go on the pile with everything else, so we're not going to worry about it too much, messing it up as we take this tape off. But I'm going to have a look underneath there and see if I have put it on upside down. So I know I've told you this before, but when you take your tape off, always take it off away from your painting so that you don't tear the paper. And let's have a quick look on the other side of this paper. And yes, most definitely, can you see that that's got more of a texture to it than that side? So most definitely that's why it's not been as successful as this one, because this side of the paper isn't going to absorb the water, so that's why it's cockling, and that's why the paint's not drying right. So all in all, it's not been a bad effort considering it was on the wrong side of the paper, so I hope you forgive me for that. Like I say, I'm always going to leave my mistakes in, because you can learn from that, and it's just, you know, it's showing you what not to do. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back again soon, and hopefully next time I'll use the right side of the paper. Bye for now.